some announcements. The Sage Center is having their annual summer food drive, GAR Library, that begins July 1st. GAR Library and the Sage Center are also having a yoga program starting July 9th. Classes are every Wednesday in the annex. And as usual, we have notice for a call for volunteers. Specifically, we need members on the Finance Committee, Climate Change Resiliency Committee, and the ZBA, as well as the Conservation Commission. Regular business, public comment. Anyone here wish to make a public comment? Okay. We'll go to item B, town manager updates.
And I do have a handful of things when we get to that topic. Oh, actually, I guess right out of the gate, we're at TEC.
Yeah.
So good. I want to be respectful of Kevin's time. I know he's got double duty tonight with a different meeting in a different community. That's where Zoom comes in handy. So I want to welcome Kevin Dandre. As you know, he's been the prime consultant on a number of projects, but we're at the project closeout stage for a conceptual planning effort for the crossing at the middle high school, the Nix. This is something that was funded by a state earmark that came up in the state budget last summer. And it was a nice follow-on, kind of a natural follow-on to the quarter planning study that was well underway at that point. This allowed us to have some resources to take one of the focus areas to a higher level of conceptual design. So per the terms of the state earmark, the work has to be closed out by June 30th. And so Kevin's here tonight to summarize the work that they did and take any questions that you may have.
Welcome, Kevin.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for the intro, Angus. Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm Kevin Dandre. I'm a principal at TEC. It's a pleasure to see you again. Following up on...
Kevin, hold on 1 second. I think we might be having seems like the audio is not coming out of the right. When I changed the volume, it seemed to change the volume on my laptop, not on the Owl. But it's showing that we're using the Owl. Hold on, just give us 1 second, Kevin.
Sure.
Say something now.
Can you hear me? How's that?
Oh, different. Yeah. All right, I think this is the best we're going to do. We can hear you. It is a little faint.
Okay. And just let me know if it comes
better.
as...
Whatever you did help. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'll accept praise for whatever I didn't do. Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for allowing me to give you the summary this evening. It's a pleasure to be back following up on some of the other work that we did with the board over the past 6 months to a year in different aspects and different portions of Main Street for different reasons. But this evening is obviously focused on Pentucket. And if it's okay with you, I'd love to share my screen so that I can just walk through a series of slides just to kind of narrate some of the things that we observed and certain recommendations.
All right, Kevin, I just made you host. I just need to emphasize that do not leave the meeting until I reclaim host, because if you do that, it will end our meeting. So.
Okay, gotcha. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. So you might recall from some of the corridor planning initiatives, if you had participated in one or more of the public meetings or seen and remember some of the recommendations that we had that we previewed with you a few months ago, for certain key locations that were crossings that were of notable interest. Unfortunately, as Angus mentioned, The concurrent timing of the state earmark for this study allowed us to just do a little bit more detailed study of the exit driveway for the Pentucket High School, Middle School, but also some of the crosswalks there, and some more focused graphics. But just for the background of some of the baseline information about the roadway in the vicinity of Pentucket, the roadway carries roughly 7,700 vehicles per day. That's based on site-specific data that we had in the road for a 2-day period last September, a week or two after school commenced. You're probably already familiar with this, but there are some elevated speeds at times when it's outside of the typical school hours that are signed and flashed in the vicinity of the driveway. But we have average speeds that are in the mid to upper 30s, but the 85th percentile, which is what a lot of the safety parameters are based on, is anywhere between 40 and 43 between eastbound and westbound in that area. Understandably, based on the positioning of the exit driveway, there's a lot of influence with Farm Lane. Fortunately, Farm Lane is fairly low in its vehicle traffic, but is in very close proximity. So it creates different minor conflicts here and there just because of possible confusion about where somebody turning, the turning from one into another, etc. So some of the features, just to walk you through, some of you may be familiar with the features that are out there today, but once the school property was redeveloped and expanded, and the new traffic pattern, the one-way traffic pattern was implemented, it came with certain driveway improvements or changes, some of which are working fine. Others may have certain challenges with it, but it's relatively new infrastructure. On the left side of the screen, you can see some of the existing monument signs for the school itself. Right in the middle of the screen, you can see the green and black sign. That is the wayfinding sign for folks that are coming primarily from West Newbury to direct them to the entrance, which is further west, just over the Groveland line. You can see one of the existing crosswalks, the one that's right in the middle of the screen in the foreground, is the one that exists between the exit driveway and Farm Lane today. On the right side, the new driveway approach, separate left and right turn lanes, both of which are about 12 feet wide, and the newly constructed sidewalk on the left side of the image, or the east side of the driveway, also between the driveway and Farm Lane. As part of the work, there were some upgraded ADA and AAB accessible curb ramps that were done to make sure that there was compliance with the current crosswalk locations. And that's the one that's right in front of the school exit driveway in Farm Lane. However, just to the west of there, on the right, you can see the existing crosswalk that's in front of Nick's place. It's a crosswalk that doesn't connect existing sidewalk features, doesn't have warning signs, and frankly, isn't very obvious to drivers that are approaching in either direction. Then we have the school operations. This is the typical scene as the buses get out, let out first on a typical school day dismissal period. And on the right, you can see the vehicle platoons of the parents or guardians that are picking up children that occur after the buses depart. This is just a couple snippets from our traffic data that we collected. So in addition to the 48-hour count that we did along Main Street, we also collected 12-hour turning movement counts with the school driveway and Farm Lane. And what that does is it counts every single through movement, left turn, right turn, depending on what approach they're coming from. So you get a sense of the level of traffic volume in any of those particular movements. On the left side, you can see the AM peak hours between 7 and 10. You can see below that the PM peak hours between 2 and 7. The reason I provided the yellow box is that eastbound approach, as far as the data was set up, is the Pawtucket Regional Exit Driveway. You can see how there is that very acute time period in the morning, pretty much between 7:15 and 7:45, when the lion's share of traffic sees activity there. Then in the afternoon at the dismissal period, you can see it's primarily between 2:15 and 2:45, when it's, again, very acute traffic influences because of the arrival and dismissal periods. So outside of that, the reason I wanted to show you this is because it drops off precipitously after those hours, particularly in the morning. And in the afternoon, there is still a drop off, but there's still some lower level activity because of sports activities, after school programs, etc. So with volumes that we're seeing here, and part of the work that we did in a memo that we issued just the other day in draft format to Angus, to establish not just the traffic volumes, not just what the delays are like today, but does it warrant anything different out there? And what we found was that because of the low volumes throughout much of the day, it would not satisfy the warranting thresholds for anything different for traffic control at the exit driveway, whether it would be in always stop or signalization, etc. In fact, the pedestrian volumes are fairly low, roughly 10 in the peak crossing hour related to after school, in that it would not be sufficiently high enough to warrant what we call pedestrian hybrid beacon, which would be, there's a few in the area. We're actually looking to put 2 on Low Street in Newburyport in the not too distant future, but it's a more pronounced traffic control device that flashes and then goes to a solid red. You need a minimum of 20 crossing pedestrians per hour to be able to warrant a device like that. So in summary, the types of traffic control that are out there are appropriate, but there are certainly enhancements that we would recommend. One of the things, when I pointed out the wayfinding sign at the beginning, in the view on the left, you can see the back side of that sign. One of our observations when we did an initial site visit back in September, with town staff, school staff, and staff member from Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, was to identify certain things, almost like a mini road safety audit, to say, what do we see collectively? What has the experience been? To try to create a list of things that could get mitigated if there were safety-related concerns, particularly related to the crosswalks, but also other traffic operations. So on the left, you can see the backside of the sign. One thing that we noticed is that depending on where you're positioned as a side street vehicle coming out of the school driveway, that sign currently partially obstructs the view looking up Main Street to the left or to the east. Other elements that we saw on the left, you can see that the existing crosswalk that used to be the primary one is only partially eradicated in the area on the right side of the driveway, between the driveway and Nick's place. So this gives a certain level of confusion for whether or not pedestrians should be there, but you can see that there is no landing for them that can get off the road, certainly in an accessible manner. But if you look at the opportunity that is created with this same vantage point, you can see that the grading, particularly on the corner in front of the Pentucket monument sign, is set up and ready to go to be able to convert this to a sidewalk or a future ADA ramp, wherever it may be. You'll see in our recommendations that we're looking to provide connectivity on the school side of Main Street to continue down in this view that you'll be shown in a different perspective momentarily. Now, this was identified as one of several different areas that we worked with the town to submit what we call project need form through the state, through Mass DOT, to try to identify opportunities that could become projects. And I think the board's well aware of that based on what you voted to endorse a few months ago. But we did two different filings. One was for a number of different isolated crossing improvements. And a second one dealt with an extension of the sidewalk on the easterly end of town on Main Street. What I wanted to report this evening is that I had an encouraging conversation with MassDOT's Complete Streets engineer yesterday, who is now aware of the project. We had reviewed it previously with District 4. So MassDOT's district office, we had a virtual meeting with town staff, with DOT and our team within the past couple weeks to be able to just introduce it to them, give them the opportunity to ask questions, just like we're presenting to you this evening, so that they can become familiar with it. And in turn, it was a good opportunity to re-inform them and introduce to them the needs associated, not just with this, but with the other uncontrolled crossings on Main Street. So good, productive discussions. It was actually the district office that suggested that I reach out to Complete Streets engineer. And just as background, TEC, our firm, is working closely with DOT as the client in that case, to do improvements like this in a scale similar to what we've recommended here throughout the state. So we knew that it obviously fit in the context of opportunities that could be funded in a regularly available process. But now that it's been identified as a need, it should get increased attention and discussion. So the Complete Streets engineer is now in the process of going back, talking to district, and seeing if and how it can fit in the context of his statewide Complete Streets program, in hopes that it can launch with funding. He's not aware of the background, so I just want to give you the encouraging news that they are now at the point of talking about how they might be able to make it now a state project or a series of projects instead of something that the town has worked diligently to fund and to participate in up to this point. So as far as more specifically describing the improvements at the Pentucket driveway, more or less starting from left to right, there's an opportunity to update and refine the school zone markings and signs and flashers so that they are fully in compliance and fully permitted with DOT. And for those of you that are aware of the Page School improvements, we actually had to go through and establish the school zone more formally with MassDOT, because surprisingly, however many decades ago, it wasn't formally established in a permit with DOT. So we're going to do the same thing here to make sure that everything can be done and formally permitted and approved by DOT, so it's up to full standards. Looking at crosswalk improvements here, the volume of traffic and the speed of traffic are sufficient to warrant what we call the RRFB, which you've probably seen this a number of times, but in the lower right, this is an enhanced safety device that when a button is pushed by a pedestrian on either side of the road, will activate these supplemental warning lights to give additional attention to the warning device, the sign itself, that somebody's looking to cross. So that is warranted in this case, and we are recommending it at this driveway between Farm Lane and the school driveway. We are also leapfrogging over to Nick's Place, a similar type of treatment with new sidewalk platforms and ramps on either side, and the connectivity to get across the driveway. Where today there's no crosswalk crossing the driveway because there's no sidewalk over here. Look to fully eradicate or get rid of the markings for the crosswalk in this location, and more specifically sign it as no pedestrian crossing, because with the major destinations being the homes over on this side from the primary school sidewalk, that is here on the left side, they can use this one, or if they're bound for Nick's Place, to be able to cross the school driveway and then cross pretty much to the front door of Nick's Place from the right of way. We're also suggesting that this new sidewalk connection be kind of serpentine its way through the existing landscaping to get down to the field and the parking area, just as a logical connection between where people congregate. And if they're anything like me, maybe you want to go grab a slice of pizza and a drink and come back and, watch your child play sports. So a number of different improvements, safety enhancements, but also things like better identifying turn restrictions at the driveway itself. So right now, in driving by, there's stop signs here at the stop line location, and there are do not enter signs. But those are really only visible as you're right on top of the driveway. What we typically do to define the access or the restrictions for access is to identify a sign that's facing traffic in advance of there in either direction, say no right or no left, to make sure that it's clear. So other than that, I think I just want to mention that if and as Nick's Place may contemplate redevelopment and whatever they do, if they touch the driveway, they may have to interact with the state, but there may be opportunities to do things that further enhance the pedestrian experience here and may actually, there's always the potential to reorganize, but potentially even add parking within a paved area that is kind of wide open today. So there may be opportunities to work with one of the private abutters here to make it even more of a pedestrian feel once you get to the south side of Main Street over here. This is important too, because with the new bus route 11 that NEVA just established along 113, whether the stop is here or down here, this is one of the more prominent locations where there could be activity, whether student related, other passengers, as what could be more formal as a stop on bus route 11. So not just the school related traffic, but other transit related traffic. You could enhance stops. You could even put a couple benches out there. But depending on the use of the transit stop. So lots of great opportunities, certainly very feasible. In the photo I showed you before, other than some minor grading, this area is kind of set and ready to go. You might have to just remove and reset a fence here after the grading's done. But it, to me, is a very feasible, attainable, implementable project. And our current cost estimate is similar to what we just had the town fund for the Page School. So somewhere around, 250,000, depending on how long, how wide these sidewalk connections are, which can affect cost. We don't see the need to get into a whole lot of other work, in either the driveway or the road. Lastly, I just want to mention that there were some conversations during the course of our observations and preparation of the concept here that revolved around the driveway flow, understanding that there used to be different traffic flow at the driveway before the redevelopment of the school property. It's now the more formal one-way operations. And there were questions about whether or not there were merits to making it two-way. It was outside the scope of the study, but just wanted to mention it that it was a topic that people seemed interested in exploring, and wanted to at least make the board aware that there's a lot of history there, but whether or not there's merits to change the traffic flow would require a separate, distinct study. So that's a summary of our findings. They are memorialized within the report that we dated June 24th, but we issued it as a draft, just in case there are things that came out of this evening's meeting or other comments from town staff that we can refine over the next week or so.
Questions from your view? No?
I'm gonna go back to the entrance of the school. We've gone down this path to get to where we are, but I think the elephant in the room is that entrance, or if it's actually an exit, is problematic. And if you're in the field and you've been out there enough, almost every time I go by there's a car trying to enter in to what is the exit, because it looks like an entrance. You've got a magnificent stone facade with a sign on it, and you can see the school from there, yet the entrance is down at the other side. And it looks like a path into the woods is so small, so it's very confusing, both the entrance and the exit. And many cars, obviously, it created a problem because people are putting boulders in the yard, they go down Farm Lane. And they're turning in driveways and such like that, so even though there's been some minimal signage put out to say, you know, the entrance is the other way, it's a pretty significant problem, so to look at correcting the structures that are currently there, I'm not sure is the right approach to start with. I think we have to decide in conjunction with the school district, first of all, how did this traffic pattern get changed? Why did it get changed? Does it make sense? Because logically, from a layperson's perspective, it makes no sense to me. So I just think we're in the wrong place to start at this point.
I'll just share what I know about that. I'll share what I know and what I don't know, and then pivot to a kind of a follow-up question that we have that I don't know if we know the answer to, but we reached out to the administration about that, and the superintendent had basically described that this change was made during the design process for the middle high school for the reason of safety, referring to two-way traffic incidents, not necessarily local, but kind of in other experience that at least he had of two-way traffic leading to pedestrian hits within the school site. And some concern about the Groveland's I guess leg being the blind spot created by the house when you're looking to the east. So it sounds like that was a significant factor in that decision. So, in his kind of framing of it, this was something that received quite a lot of focus and attention. I'm interested to learn more about that because as a member of the school building committee, it wasn't a matter that got any focus or attention to the school building committee. Both Wendy and I were on the committee, and I know we felt it was something that was made, it seemed to us to be a change made very late in the process. I did pull up on my server some of the earlier site plans I had for the project, and they all showed two-way traffic up to a certain point. So I have not had time to go take a look at the planning records to see what was actually before the planning board and when was the change made relative to the site plan review that the project went through. Because I honestly don't know the answer to that. The other question that came up that we talked about with Kevin, his associate Rebecca last week, but I doubt that there's been time to kind of run this to the ground with DOT. Is just obviously DOT would have had to approve that, and so we were kind of at a staff level just curious, when did that come to DOT's attention? What process did they go through in presumably authorizing that change? They would have had to. It was a curb cut permit. So I don't know, Kevin, if that came up. I mean, we just talked with you. I think it was just last week, and so but there's something better understand kind of by what entity was that decision
You said
made?
DOT would have, they
They
might
would-
not.
well-
There was a curb cut already there, so it existed.
Right.
Granted, it's modified. That'd be my question is, where's the engineering study that said this was the best option for both the schools and the traffic on 113?
Yeah.
Because it seems like it got switched last minute.
It felt
Doesn't
last
feel,
and I'd be curious, I don't wanna put Chief Flyer on the spot, but I don't know, like, it felt last minute, like, so I don't know whether anyhow, this came up at a recent meeting, and we knew it would come up tonight, and so we've been trying to scramble to kind of backfill, like, what exactly happened. But I would definitely echo what Kevin said, this that, any discussion of potentially changing that, obviously, Chris, you acknowledge that would be, really the district. But that would need to be studied, but, I don't know within the room if we know anything about like really how was that decision made, who was involved? Because on the school building committee, it felt like it was almost like right before school opened. That they were like, oh,
It's
it's
like
gonna be
by
one
the
way this way and the striping's gonna be different and we put in, and I believe the parking that is right next to the turf practice field there, I think that head-in parking was added at that same time. Which was probably a good move, but probably wouldn't be there if it was two-way, but I feel like that was all kind of very late. Not to say it was bad, I don't know, I'm not a traffic engineer, but it felt late. It felt last minute.
You keep saying, well, if the conversation is generated on two-way, it could be just a reverse flow of
Right,
that, doesn't have to be one, you know.
Sure, yeah,
So can we, as a select board, request from the school committee of the district, the engineering study and the DOT approval that predicated this change? To start the discussion that way. I just don't wanna spend town funds on.
yeah, it'd be great to have them provide the documents rather than us like trying to rummage through the planning
They
record.
have to have them. so-
Or have Kevin's team like trying to find something like a needle in a haystack with DOT.
I'd just be concerned spending $250,000 on something that a year later you go, this traffic patch on, now you gotta dig it all up and put it at the other side of it.
Mhm.
Kevin, do you think it would have been likely that DOT would have had to approve that change in traffic flow if there wasn't a new curb cut?
Yes, because any modifications to curb cuts, even if physical only, but no traffic volume change, would precipitate a driveway permit review. But in this case, with the redevelopment and expansion, changes in traffic flow and physical changes within state highway, it's highly unlikely that it did not involve a detailed permit review. So, and because they own all of 113, both driveways would have been looked at the same time under the same permit because they're obviously directly related. I mentioned that Angus, that I wouldn't be providing any specific opinions, but what I can tell you is that if there were concerns about sight lines at the westerly driveway in Groveland, that would be one reason why to consider certain restrictions, but not necessarily wholesale one-way change. I can tell you that throughout many downtowns in Massachusetts, we're being hired to change one-way patterns to two-way patterns for multiple reasons. Not the least of which is flexibility for emergency services or redundancy in the case of work, utility work, incidents, whatever it may be, to have two-way access at two different points to provide flexibility. I understand the concerns about the cues that are given to people today at the exit driveway, with the monument sign. And that's particularly why, since the original concept was done, that we added some of those left and right turn prohibition signs, because it looks like it might be an entrance. So I understand the different perspectives, but I don't have any opinions on what makes sense because we just haven't dug into those details. And it's not without just looking at the driveways. It really requires, and I think as you're indicating, having more of the history and the experience of those that deal with the on-site operations every day, because two-way flow can affect on-site traffic operations. And without snarling up traffic on the site. So there are a lot of different reasons for trying to do a dive, but I think it would be wise for the board to request the history and the rationale of what occurred, because that might, provide the background for why it is the way it is today.
One thing that's just kind of a curiosity, but very early in my time here, like my first year, I remember, and I was new to the school building committee. Everything was very dynamic with the project passing and so forth, the funding. But I remember bringing a question to the to the project architect in 2019 as to whether we could look at an RFP at the next crossing, because it just seems so obvious that that would be the desired path for students going to the pizza shop. They're not crossing to go east, they're crossing to go get pizza. So I remember having that dialogue. We had some emails back and forth, and I was told correctly that, you know, you can't just do that. You've got to have an accessible landing area. You've got to have it go somewhere. You've got to have a new stretch of sidewalk. And basically I was told that would blow it into a big project, and it's not part of the scope of the middle high school, and it's too late. I remember being told that in like 2019. And so here we are, you know, 5 years, 6 years later, kind of advancing that same idea. But that's where I'm just a little kind of curious as to this, what felt like a late change that was not only to the traffic flow, but it was additional parking that was added. It was a pretty substantial change, and it was, you know, that was made like a couple of years after we first started asking the project architect about this exact crossing that we're talking about today. So I don't know, it's not really that helpful to, but I think the starting point would be exactly what Chris said, you know, on what basis was the decision made, what kind of engineering or other kind of input was provided, and when. And I would be curious, just looking back at the planning board permitting records, because everything I have on file shows two-way. And I didn't save every last attachment to every last email I got in the school building committee. We got, you know, tons of information, so they're not all on my server. But everything I pulled up was all showing the original expectation, and it kind of reminded me that, yeah, it felt like a surprise. It felt like a late change.
Might be interesting also just to ask them how this has worked out. Are they aware of any incidents? You know,
I've seen delivery trucks going in that, they come to it, they obviously see the sign, they get confused, and they just drive right in, and. I mean, cars are bad enough, but delivery trucks will go up. I've seen a dump truck going in. It's not one or two, it's on a regular basis. It's just, even if they have engineering that says this is a great plan, the reality is it's not.
well, that's why if there's some anecdotal, you know, experience on the school side, then maybe they'd be more interested in changing, you know.
And if it's okay with the board and with you, Angus, I'm happy to draft an email to Daniel Flint, the permits engineer for District 4. I don't think he was in the position when this application came through years ago, but he is the current permits engineer. And I could just copy you and ask for if he has the files on hand that supported the permit, just as we, you know, work to evaluate other potential improvements, you know, following on a recent productive discussion last week. So
I think that'd be great, yeah, and I would reemphasize to everybody, you know, this is a concept plan, so even though, you know, the figure of 250 was put out there, as you know, from the Page Pipe Save crosswalk, there's a lot of stages of 25% engineer, 75% engineering permits. It's years, it's many stages, so I think it's, you know, I don't think there's anything, I think Chris, maybe you said something like it was misplaced to do this before looking at that. I don't agree with that, because I think they're really two different issues. This is a concept plan for this, this is exactly what, as you get further into the design process, if the scope basically expands to now also look at internal site circulation, that's great. That was never part of the scope. That was never even within what would have been allowable with the earmark, which was specific to Route 113. So I don't think there's anything that's not been productive about doing what we've done here.
Austin, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I kind of agree with what you're saying, Angus, and it kind of seems to me like even if it ever did get to the point where we were considering changing the flow, it looks like a lot of the legwork that was done with this plan could be salvaged. It kind of looks like it would just be like signage essentially that would need to be changed, not the physical work that you contemplated.
yeah, I mean, that's very possible. I would just caution that without knowing the capacity or the backup impacts associated with the two-way flow, it is possible that if it was converted, that it might have one entrance lane and 2 exit lanes versus the 2 lanes that are only exit today. So there is the possibility that there could be a need for physical changes, but it's just, it would be too speculative at this point.
Okay.
Good, well, we'll follow up with Pentucket to see what they can provide, and Kevin will do the same with DOT, and, while their formal scope with regard to this project will end with the end of the fiscal year, we'll be continuing to talk about this over the coming months.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Have a great evening, everybody. And Angus, what do I have to do to,
Oh, I already reclaimed host.
Oh,
He doesn't trust
okay.
you.
Yeah.
all right,
Right,
I
good
did
luck with
remember
you.
though.
All right,
All right,
Thanks a
thanks,
lot.
everybody. Have a great evening.
Bye.
thanks, Butch. Well, good night. Good night. So now we're back on to the town manager updates. We took that one out of order just based on scheduling, so. The MBTA zoning location working group, we've got another meeting coming up on Monday. The prior meeting resulted in somewhat shortlisting the list from the first meeting. To went down shorter, then went down shorter more, further reduction. And those 4 potential locations, or I shouldn't even say potential, those 4 locations under kind of continuing study have been sent to MVPC. Their running goes through their so-called compliance model. We expect to have those results in the next day or so, with the next working group meeting coming up on Monday. So basically the work is underway. As we knew, it's a very fast pace, very quick turnaround between meetings. But the idea is to get the MVPC's take on which of 4 locations, in their opinion, would be eligible. And then the discussion will be to shortlist that further, to which ones might be referred by the town to the state for formal consideration by the state as to whether they would be eligible. And concurrent with that, or really ahead of that, would be notice to the property owners and abutters to those properties to let them know that while we're a ways away from a decision being made, the property that they either own or abut is something that is under consideration and is being studied. So Wendy's drafted a letter that will be reviewed by the working group on Monday, and then I think we'll go out probably Tuesday to the owners and abutters of any property or location that's under consideration.
Yeah, if we, I think coming out on Monday, we'll have decided which parcels are gonna be submitted to HLC, so
Okay.
we'll just limit it, the letter to those owners and abutters.
Next item, library feasibility study working group. We had a meeting earlier this week. All of the members attended, really good discussion. That's moving along also at a really nice clip. And we're honing in on a draft scope. There's a draft that's been in circulation, and we've got, I think, till the end of maybe like Tuesday or so to provide comments. And then that'll be recirculated prior to the next library feasibility study working group meeting, which I forget the exact date, but it's 2.5 weeks out, something like that. But basically it's going exactly as was outlined in the charge, which is to hone in on a draft work scope, which would then be the basis of estimating pricing of what a study like this would cost. And I do think that there's going to be some presentation of that to the select board to get some input as to whether this board thinks that the draft scope is kind of what you have in mind, and that's going to be before the warrant closes on August 21st. So it's not like a last minute thing. And one of the key items of discussion at the recent meeting that I think will be a key item for discussion when it is next before the board for consideration is to what extent to study the town hall as a, I don't know how much more to say about that, but like how deep to go in a feasibility study of the town hall relative to the library, which obviously is the, primary impetus of why, this effort is underway in the first place is the library, so. Anything you wanna add to that?
No, I just want to comment that this working group model is pretty successful in both of these two, this and fire project. One that we should, particularly use and build consensus on things.
The Coffin Street Conservation Area, that is, the fencing was completed earlier today. The parking is complete. DPW is gonna be cleaning the area up next week, loaming and seeding, adding some more gravel where needed. Raking around posts in the moat area, and we are working with the direct abutter on the, formal agreement for relocation of the mailbox. He's provided his assent to the, form of agreement. So I wasn't sure, based on the last meeting, it seems like everything we're doing is 100% within what the board already voted. So I think unless there's any concern about that, I would think that you as the chair have the authority to, once that language is kind of agreeable to you, it's all within what you guys talked about with moving the mailbox. So if you do feel it needs another board vote, I would suggest moving it to an action item on tonight's agenda, just so we can keep that moving forward.
I was up there today because I saw Butch Town Hall. Actually, I hiked it through there on Saturday, which was funny because it came in off of Coffin Street. And the trail didn't go all the way through at the time, so you get in there, you push back and you get out.
We did hear from Dave Rimmer today, actually, and they are gonna be extending that through, so.
Yeah, they'll get there, it's a beautiful property.
They'll get there soon, yeah.
So I hit the parking area, that was great, and then, so I saw Butch. And I saw the fencing coming up there to see it, the fencing contractor was there. And it is the locust, which looks really, really nice versus pressure treated. And the fencing contractor said to me, they had decided on the site where the mailbox was gonna go.
Mhm.
And then the property owner took a time out to run that by his legal now, so.
But that was probably, he's since reviewed it with legal, I don't, what day was this?
Today. This morning at about 10 o'clock.
But he might have been referring to the prior discussion.
He said was all set to do it, and was told to hold off, so he's.
Oh, he might have been told to hold on by Butch, because until we have it in writing, we have an email from the property owner saying he's reviewed it with the attorney and he's fine with it.
Okay, so maybe
We
the
just
guy
haven't signed, and I told Butch, do not let anyone touch that mailbox until we have a legal binding agreement, so that's probably what happened, but, the terms are all agreed, there's just not the signatures.
But it looks great, I mean, it just, nice job with the parking, the clearing is minimal,
Mhm.
and the fencing looks great. So,
So are you guys all right with, KP Law draft the agreement, so it's not something I.
I'll just move that right away, it's wherever it goes, yeah. That's agreeable.
Yeah. That offer diffused things pretty well.
I think it did it.
Cool.
Yeah, it was their suggestion.
And while the idea was that the fence contractor would move the mailbox while they were mobilized, Butch has said it's no problem for his crew to do that, so even though Parker Fence completed their work today, that would have been a nice efficiency, but it's easy for his crew to go out and do that once we have the signed agreement.
Anything else from Dave Verner's email that we?
Well, so their intent would be to put up one of their very standard, green belt signs. It's the 60-inch by 10-inch, kind of a long, narrow, you've seen it at different properties around town. It simply has kind of the green belt, branding and would say Coffin Street Conservation Area. That to me is a very, that seems easy, yeah, of course, put that there. I think the bigger question, I responded to Dave this afternoon to let him know, I do think this is gonna be, to come back to the board for some discussion, is the idea of more of a wayfinding sign, showing the property, showing the trails, what's shown as a trail, including, I know they represented, they have a agreement with an abutting owner of private property to extend a trail across their property, but it's not a formal easement. Dave has said they would intend to show that on the wayfinding sign they're posting on their Coffin Street access. I think that's something we're gonna wanna look at. That might be fine, but it's something we need to look at. And then in terms of whether or what signage there'd be at the Cortland Lane, entrance in terms of more of like a wayfinding, like a map of the property. You know, I think we would wanna really think about, do we wanna show a map showing a trail on private property, if in fact, even if that owner has said they're fine with it. If there's not a legal right of public access, it's just something I think we need to really look at. So, I don't know, it sounds like, that'll probably be on a future agenda, perhaps as early as 2 weeks from now.
I wonder in terms of location, if there's any advantage to putting this, the Portland Lane entrance sign like back in the woods instead of right at the market.
I would think so, yeah,
Just to try to not aggravate me further.
yeah. Yeah, cause if the, greenbelt sign is there, you know, having a wayfinding sign that kind of draws people
Yeah.
into the site is, it would seem to make sense.
We also, should put a, conservation or CPC sign there or CPA sign.
Yep. Good idea, yeah. Or, I mean, could that be built into the design of more of a wayfinding sign to have that acknowledgement on that sign rather than a separate sign, or?
On the other greenbelt properties in town, we've just, added a separate sign, but, you know, but they've been after the fact, so. Check if they can see them, to do that.
MVP grant application, just a brief memo in the packet as to kind of the direction we're going. We don't have anything tangible yet on that, but obviously, you know, Worsley Wet Group is in high demand and just like everyone juggling a lot of projects. So she did think she could free up time around the end of this month and felt there was some focused attention that she could turn something around fairly quickly in terms of some advice. So I'm hoping that for our next meeting 2 weeks from now, we'd have something more to talk about there.
Was there anticipation that the grant would be known by this point? I thought they said end of June.
It's the end of June. Yeah, that's what they've said. I mean,
So we haven't heard anything.
no, yeah, and you know how the state is, but yeah, the announcement could be as early as next week. It wouldn't surprise me a bit if it lagged. But once the grant announcement is made, that there will be a period of time before, you know, scope confirmation and. So. Let's see, we had a meeting, on Tuesday morning, pretty lengthy meeting, actually with myself, Fanny and Caitlin Gilbert with the, new auditor. Very positive, really good. Well, I think we're off to a great start with that relationship. I put some of the materials kind of truncated, but just to give you an idea of kind of what's ahead of us in the finance department on, you know, being responsive to audit, and you can see it's a busy time and there's a lot there. But there were no surprises. One thing that I really appreciate, and which I had in my prior job up north, but had not had here, is exactly what's in the packet, which is a checklist of exactly what we want. Because as you know, we don't, you know, surprises are difficult when you're as busy as we are, and even if it's relatively straightforward, we wanna know what we need to produce so we can produce timely. And not have, you know, typically, sometimes in the past, it's been during audit week, we're kind of on our toes, like. We kind of actually have to like leave the whole week open because we're like, we don't know. They extend it, this CLA gives us the courtesy of it's a long list, there's a lot on it. But great, check, there's even a column for who's accountable. I left that off what I put in there, but you know. Jenny, Caitlin, myself, assessing water, you know, it's going to allow us to quarterback this much more efficiently than we've ever been able to do in the 7 years I've been here. And that's something we did ask for, so it's good. That in of itself was great, just like, and we went through every single item on that list with the 4 of us. And the only thing that I would say is anything of kind of, definitely not a curveball, but a wrinkle, which we've known would be for a while, but they had some very specific advice that I think, you know, I think will be good. The capital asset inventory, this is something that's been a little bit odd for a while because It's been housed, those of you who are newer to the board may or may not remember, we did a major accounting software conversion at the beginning of FY19. We changed from SoftWrite to Vadar. And we moved everything over to Vadar except our capital asset module. And that's something that Roselli Clark had maintained our capital asset inventory, which is a very technical thing with depreciation and so forth. And they've known how to do that. They said they do that for pretty much all their clients, that the town doesn't even like touch that. But the auditor has been maintaining our capital asset inventory with the input that they've received from us on what vehicles we've bought or sold and all of that. But they've actually maintained that database in the SoftWrite platform, which is an old software. So that's something that, now's the time to migrate that to a whole new platform. And the CLA auditor had a software package that he recommended to us. He said it's only about $200. It's for that purpose. It has the depreciation formulas. It's exactly for that purpose. So that is a little bit of a, wrinkle. We need to learn a new software. So again, that's fine, but just audit's a big deal and it takes a lot of staff time and so me and Jenny and Caitlin and others, but it's it's one more thing, so.
And what's the time period approximately?
So they set out, we are in alignment on that, we set actually specific dates for the week that they're gonna be out, or not the whole week, but they'll be out in August to do some preliminary field work, and then they'll be back, I don't have the dates right in front of me, but I think it's around the second or third week of September, which is exactly when we wanted it. So we're in the calendar, it's actually in Outlook for both of those visits. And so we reached out to Jake to see about, we want to get the software and we're gonna have to learn how to do that. But by mid-September, we have everything buttoned up and that allows them to come in, have everything they need. The holdup tends to be, as it was last year, the Essex Regional retirement, because CLA can't close out our audit until Essex Regional closes out its audit. Last year, that was the reason there was a many-month delay. We had our financials, probably, I want to say like early to mid-October. We had all our financial statements, but they couldn't be formally closed out until Essex Regional, which took into 2025, so. But yeah, I think we're off to a good start, very good start there. Staffing updates, we've got a new town clerk, Amanda Hagstrom is starting on Monday. We're super excited about that. She's terrific. She came out last Friday, met with Max, just kind of on her own time. They've met through different clerk associations, and I was out that day, but Max tells me it went well. Or do you want to say anything about it?
Yeah, so my goal was to just orient her to the physical side of things, in terms of the building, where things are, sort of where things live. Our elections closet, the annex, sort of that groundwork stuff, because obviously when she gets in here on June 30th, it's gonna be meetings and all that fun stuff, so I was like, well, why don't we, kind of get a jump start on some of that stuff and just introduce you to the building and then get some of the paperwork done that we need to get her into our vitals and state voter database and stuff like that, so.
Great.
Yeah, happy she was able to make that work.
So, was this Friday afternoon? So were other employees gone or did she?
Yeah, she met a few people, she met some of the finance folks and custodial staff and stuff. So.
Then on conservation, we have a meeting posted for Monday night. We've invited in 2 finalists. The conservation agent, that is my appointment to make, but obviously it matters a great deal to me to have someone who works well with the commission, that they like, and also I think it's a good opportunity for the 2 finalists to meet the commissioners who they would be working with most closely. So they have a more complete understanding of the organization than would have come from the initial interviews with myself and the Concom chair. So I do think it's highly likely that coming out of Monday night, I would be going to an offer letter immediately, and you never know what happens there and whether people accept or whether that happens quickly or not quickly. But best case scenario, we would have a signed offer letter in the next week, and then we would set a start date based on that person's transition period. So hopefully we'll have a agent on the books.
End of July.
That would be my goal, yeah. But in the meantime, you know, I can't say enough about Molly, the work that she's doing to kind of continue to keep things running. And obviously Jen Geary, but Jen gets a paycheck for the work she's doing. Molly's a volunteer. She's definitely, you know, picked up a lot during the transition, but and Clay is continuing to help us as well. We've extended the agreement with him. It's just a couple of hours here and there. Obviously, he's got a full-time job, but he's been very helpful to maintain continuity on some of the permitting that was ongoing when he was here. Then on town planning, you may or may not know, we did get notice from the town planner, so that position is now vacant. We posted the position and we had our exit interview earlier this week. That was very productive, and Katrina did a nice memo kind of with all the status of everything that's active. So I'm working with Rebecca, and I are working with Jan Geary. I met with the planning board chair, Ann Bardine, yesterday for over an hour, and we talked through a lot of things. I think we're in a good position for the transition. And we're also engaging NBC. I've been in touch with Gerard within a half a day of receiving notice, because I felt that would be of value to have, you know, kind of some staffing support during the transition, especially for meeting coverage. And so Ian Burns is available to help. And we had a follow-up meeting earlier today, myself, Gerard, and Ian, to talk in more detail about, just because they want to make sure they understand exactly what the expectations are. And so we'll formalize that, but they're going to be able to assist. And Jen's very comfortable with that. And Ann thought that was a great idea. So we have already gotten a few applications in, but I think it'll probably be second half of July before we start interviewing, because you don't want a short list until you have a good idea of what the talent pool is. Some other items, just brief updates. I actually have a number of things here, but we're working on we've got the invasive management contract for the Cherry Hill and River Bend, and we're working to set up a meeting with the consultant Brian Colleran in July. Paul and Butch have been the point on that, but I'm involved with that, as well as a number of the citizen volunteers who've been involved with invasive. So once we have a site visit scheduled, the idea is to basically, he's going to come out, evaluate how the prior treatments took for those properties, and make recommendations for what additional treatments to do this fall, but also to look more bigger picture. What other property or properties might we want to prioritize for invasives management? And so as that conversation gets further along, obviously this board and the Concom will both be involved with that decision making. Any work would, in all likelihood, require permitting. So where Cherry Hill and River Bend had already gone through the notice of intent, the Concom process, that hasn't happened with other properties. So there's no expectation that any other treatment would take place until at least next summer, because we would have to have the resources to bring that work through permitting. But that's underway. Let's see. I'm going to skip over some of these just in the interest of time. We got our first settlement payment under the PFAS class action litigation. We had a number of questions about that. So we set up a remote meeting, and earlier today, me and Rebecca and Jenny connected with the attorneys from Napoli Skolnick, and they were able to answer all of our questions, and we now have the answers to our questions. So we'll have that on your next agenda to do a more formal briefing on that. I didn't want to bring it forward because I knew you would just ask me 10 questions, so I figured I wanted to give myself time to get some more information. All we got was a check and a letter, and it's great to get a check, and it's great to have money, but there were a lot of questions about the accounting side, eligible uses, whether it's got to be appropriated, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So, and this was a settlement for just one of the 3M settlement, and there's 3 other active class action litigation. So we'll talk about that in more detail in the next meeting. let's see, oh, we did, there's been a lot of back and forth on the Page Pipe State construction contract. We did get, as of this afternoon, town council has approved in writing the form of everything. There was some, there was no, it's just getting the paperwork in place, you know, just a lot of back and forth, but it's all in place. Caitlin has signed the contract. It's not fully executed because the town council's got to sign, but that happened just late this afternoon. So I think by the end of tomorrow, we'll have a fully executed construction contract with Commonwealth Construction for the Page Pipe State crossing. And then we can get toward actual notice to proceed and getting that work scheduled. But that was a big milestone. It takes a lot to get these contracts in place.
And so when would the work start, most likely?
Well, until we have a signed contract. I mean, the goal remains to get it done this summer. So that's the goal. But
So is there a contingency plan in case?
it doesn't, that was never necessary.
Okay,
It would be nice because it would be nice to minimize disruptions. You know, during the school year when there's a lot more traffic to and from the school, it would be nice, but there is no. You know, it's not like there's, you know, a lot of kids crossing that road to get to school. The goal is to get it done by the time school starts. And that was clear in the bid documents, so I'm, you know, certainly hoping the vendor will deliver, but where I have not been personally involved with those conversations, I'm certainly not in a position to speak for them. You know, once the contract is executed, then the schedule a meeting, we'll go through that in more detail. The pickleball permit filings were both submitted to both Concom and Planning Board. The Concom public hearing will open on Monday, July 7th, and the Planning Board hearing on site plan review will open on Tuesday, July 15th. I will be out of town on the 15th. I'm down at Cape Cod that week, so I don't know if one of you is interested to attend, but I think it would be great to have the member of the board. I'm gonna make sure we have someone from Park and Rec there in attendance. And Williams Asparagus is the project engineer. They'll be the formal representative for the application. So if no one else can be there, it's really not the end of the world.
The planning board meeting,
Yeah,
that's from, they're all remote anyways,
correct.
no physical.
Yeah. But
I was planning to go anyway.
okay, great, yeah. But yeah, if I'm on Cape Cod, I'm not.
Good.
No, I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
no, that's sacrosanct.
I just-
The one comes the whole year that I actually turn off my phone, so definitely not. I'm not zooming in. We closed out, earlier this week, we closed out the municipal ADA grant with the state. That's the push button activated. Sam submitted all the closeout paperwork and photographs, that was, installed here down at the town hall and dispatch. So that's great to see that close out. We haven't formally changed over to the key fobs. It's all set up, but there's still some work to do to configure the fobs, make sure every person's fob is calibrated to the appropriate hours. You know, make sure the building timing is all set, so that there's some programming that's happening there. But in terms of the funds have been expended, the system is up, it works, even though we haven't formally changed over to it. Once we do change over to it, we'll allow some time to pass, maybe 6 or 8 weeks, but at some point we will be rekeying the physical locks. Because that was kind of part of the objective of the whole thing, is to have to kind of resolve that loose end of unaccounted for keys that go back to prior to my tenure, you know, physical keys to this building that are parts on that. That's part of like why this has been on my list since one of the team to get this.
If the chair of every committee gets a key and, you know,
Like
going
in the old days.
20 years, so.
And there was no list, there was no inventory of things.
So
I
they
mean,
were just
there are
handing off to
literally
the next chair.
dozens of keys up there. So,
Passing it around to their kids.
yeah, this is gonna be good from a risk management standpoint. And then finally, I'll wrap it up with this. This is brand new information that I think is quite exciting, is we recently received a notice from Senator Tarr's office that there is a earmark, the town of West Newbury, in the FY 25 Fair Share Surplus Supplemental Budget Conference Committee report which the Senate passed on June 18th. It has not been signed by the governor, so it's not official yet. But if this goes forward, there will be another $50,000 earmark, shall be expended for the planning, design, and construction for crosswalks on State Highway Route 13. So kind of almost on cue. We
Yeah.
kind of figured something like this would happen, but once that becomes official, we can talk about, you know, how best to allocate that, but presumably that would allow us to continue to make progress, whether on the project we talked about tonight, the library crossing, or something else, so. I think
That's it.
that's it. Well, I skipped over 7, but those are the important ones.
All right, very good. All right, moving on to action items. Item A is a request to appoint Tim Vernon to the Energy and Sustainability Committee.
Yeah, make a motion to appoint Tim Cronin to that committee or any committee he wants to be on. What is the term duration?
This would be the remainder of the year, or
This is like, when you would be, this would be
So
through,
they're one-year appointments, so it would be through June 30th of 2026.
So we're not going to this year and then to reappoint him with the list of everybody we'll reappoint for next year.
we already reappointed everybody.
Right.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to appoint Tim Cronin to the Energy Sustainability Committee through June 30th, 2026.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Tim's great. Yeah, but it's disappointing left the planning board, I'm glad he's back here.
Okay, so we have a memo from the temporary town clerk. So these are just some miscellaneous appointments that are not on the fire.
the last 4 cats.
So any, we have to do these individually or?
I would say as presented, just so,
Okay,
because that's what you can feel. Makes my life easier, so I don't have to raise it.
any questions on any of these?
So we're just doing.
Council on
Not
Aging?
doing the others on the back here, just these 4.
Yes,
Make a motion, we do the reappointments for the 4 positions as listed for the times as specified.
let's say there's 3 reappointments and 1 appointment.
Technically, appointment, because Brian Richards, an alternate member, he's become full.
That's a friendly thing.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Aye. All right, then the next item is review the list of reserve officers seeking reappointment. This is something we do every year. Chief, are there any new officers on here, or are these all the ones that have?
I believe that is the most up-to-date list. We're always certainly soliciting reserve officers, but, we're all probably tired of hearing this, but the, changes at the state level have completely caused us not to be able to even hire a reserve anymore, part-time officer anymore. So that's getting towns like Western and similar sized agencies really hard. Just talking with my staff earlier, and half of us were reserves, we worked as reserves, we bought every piece of equipment that we have, some of which we have today. And now that's just change. So while I was looking, I was communicating with candidates out there, the pool is much smaller now than ever. Anybody who's a reserve, they're on the docket. They're happy. But all these officers have been working, they've been communicating with me regularly. We do have a more robust list of reserves than many of our closer agencies, so that's good too.
Need to hold on to them.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to reappoint the police reserve officers, the 6 as listed through June 30th, 2026.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. Right, next item is the request to authorize the town manager to execute the elementary lease.
And one item that the board had asked about at the prior discussion and didn't make it into the packet, but I did run these numbers early today. So I'm handing out, there was a request about how the per square foot compared to the children's castle. So that's what you have here. So I put in the FY 26 actual rent for Children's Castle, that's based on their lease that goes through next fiscal year. Translates to a per square foot of $20.27, for obviously much larger space, 8,010 square feet. Learning Tree at the proposed rate, or what's before you in the packet, reflecting 3% increase from the current year, would be a rate of $17.68 per square foot. Obviously, they're very different spaces in terms of amenity and all kinds of things. So I personally, I don't know how important, how relevant that is, because it's kind of like, but you had asked, and so here's the data.
Shows nothing.
It's
Nothing's
interesting.
too far out of the line.
No, I think so, yeah, and I think given that it's kind of, I don't know, I'm not a commercial realtor, but you know, you talk about class C, class A, class B, whatever, it's, I don't know what's what. But it seems that one is probably more amenity rich than the other, so some difference, I think, is certainly. You know, I'd be frankly concerned if they were the same, that would seem unfair to one or the other.
Any questions on the lease itself, comments?
It is for the 2 years for 3%.
So it's for the 2 years for 3% each year, which is what the board had talked about. You know, the proprietor Kelly Webster, she did ask if the board would consider a single increase for the 2-year term. And so I told her I would represent that request, but that the direction had been 3% for each of the 2 years. And I explained the rationale of, you know, town budget goes up every year, people's taxes go up every year. So
That's fair as a method of doing business too. Quick math, you had it, it must have $40 a month or something like that.
yeah, it's I think that's about, yeah, so it's yep, yeah, like 36 bucks. Yeah,
Utilities also go up every year, right?
that's right, yeah,
So I think this is reasonable.
I think it's reasonable.
Any comments on these terms, maybe?
Have enough mention to it, so it's been done.
Yeah.
The motion to authorize the town to sign the lease for the Learning Tree.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Thank you.
we're gonna skip over item B and F.
Oh, we're skipping them both? I thought it was,
There's no point to do, we should wait and do them both together when it's here. My God,
is there any reason why they're postponed?
I asked to postpone because some of the information's not on.
Some incorrect, again, your insurance certificates from 2020, so just once.
So if you have any specific, comments, you can give them to Max and he work on. Item G, request to extend the student resource officer MOU with Kentucky.
Oh, I should have said school resource officer.
Oh, student. Did I say student or school?
I said, well, the agenda says student, but it is the school resource. I think that's my typo. So this has in the past been a number of years ago, and this is really maybe for Ross's benefit primarily. There didn't used to be a written agreement. There was a kind of, I guess there must have been an agreement because monies were paid from Kentucky each year for a share of costs that the town bears to provide the SRO position. My first, I don't know if my first year or two, this agreement was put in place because there was an interest from at that time the select board and the finance committee to memorialize that. And so what you have in front of you had gone through quite a bit of review back then. Since that time, it has been a pretty routine carry forward with the cost amounts that are based on a kind of a fixed annual increase of I think 2.5% a year. So so that's what's before you. I did talk to Justin Bartholomew, and he doesn't need the school committee to vote on this. He can sign this on his own authority. And he has expressed he would intend to sign it, assuming that it's continuously agreeable to the town. He did make the point that we have had for the last 2 years, for the better part of 2 years, we really actually haven't had a dedicated SRO. And they've continued to pay the fee. That's probably a discussion for another time. I don't wanna, mix things up for tonight, but I mentioned that to Wendy the other day, and we both kind of felt that might bear a discussion at a future date as to, in the event the town, due to staffing reasons, actually doesn't have someone to do that. Should that amount be prorated? It has not been prorated, they.
Is there an office in there though, or not?
No, because we had Manny left
Yeah,
for another department, and then a different officer was, I forget the exact sequence, if Dwyer was here, he could, but the recent dynamic is there was an officer who expressed interest in being the SRO, but needed to go to academy. So was off at academy for a period of 4 months. And we had the expectation until a couple of weeks ago that that person was going to be the SRO. Recently told Dwyer they changed their mind and instead want the overnight shift, so he's now gonna be going through a new process this summer to name a new SRO for the next school year. Now Dwyer provides coverage at the school, he's down there a lot, but there's not been a dedicated officer for this entire school year. And for about half of last school year, so I don't wanna like mix up things for tonight, but it's something that you should be aware of for.
Well, it seems like that should be in the MOU, in the event that an officer is not or something, but probably don't wanna be redrafting that at this point.
I mean, I would rather frankly have you vote it tonight and revise it in a month or two.
Okay,
For the simple reason that the way it's written. If June 30th comes and goes and it's not renewed, it's expired, and I'd rather have.
so this is only through June 30th.
Well, the way it's written, it provides for up to 2 additional 1-year extensions, but they require a vote of the board. So why it was done that way instead of simply doing a 3-year agreement, I think, we'd have to go back to last year's minutes to kind of remind ourselves why that was made.
I'd be interested in.
Yeah, actually, it would have been 2024, so at this point, it was through FY 25, for 2 additional 1-year terms commencing July 1, 2025 and July 1, 2026. Any such extensions subject to approval of the town of West Newbury is authorized by the select board, so should the parties fail to extend this agreement by written addendum here too, the agreement shall terminate upon the last day of the then current term. So I would much rather be amending an active agreement.
Yeah.
Than having this lapse and
I'm with
then,
that too, and like it's 33,000.
Yeah.
But yet we know an officer costs close to 100.
yep,
So I know it's not fully dedicated there, but these are conversations, and if, again, just hearing that the office hasn't been there, be at the school, what we're paying for, that's a valid concern on
it's a
their part.
valid concern, yeah.
And then my original question was gonna be, based on the difficulty that we have getting and keeping a full force here, might not it be better for the school district to get their own officer? I don't know if that's a possibility, how that works, or even Groveland has that opportunity too, so. And I think it's a conversation to be had, but I'm all in favor of moving the agreement forward this time.
I think that would be my recommendation, and then to put it on an agenda, perhaps in July, maybe not July 10th, because I want, but maybe the second July meeting. Have Dwyer here, invite Justin to really have the key parties here. And then, one thing we mentioned that I think at the last meeting, but it's a date coming up is on, we expect to be on the, August 12th. Pentucket School Committee meeting agenda for a different topic. So that timing would work well to have a discussion of the SRO ahead of that, and then if it's, of value to do that, we could perhaps talk about that night as well.
okay.
So, and that was on the Page School, kind of.
We haven't scheduled that, correct? Yet?
Well, we talked about the date. It's not a posted, it's not.
Okay.
Yeah, right, but it's that's the school committee's meeting in August. And so that was gonna be a time to basically talk about what we anticipate for potential SOI or whatever to do with Page School.
I'll get you.
So I have the 2.5%, is that consistent with the union contract?
No.
So isn't that could that be an issue if this is a union officer?
No, well, I mean, isn't an issue, it depends, I mean, that's I guess I'll answer it two ways. Is it an issue in terms of whether there's enough money to pay the officer? No. Because this comes in as a revenue account. The officer's not paid from these revenues. This comes into as what's called miscellaneous recurring revenue, which Jenny and I report at the tax recap in the fall, the DOR. We don't pay out of a revenue account. We receive the money in this pocket, pay out of the operating budget. So when we budget on the expense side, we budget the full amount. We don't budget the net amount. When I started, they were budgeting the net amount. That was incorrect, and there was auto adjustment every single year because they were doing it.
But if we're paying,
Well, there's a fairness issue. That's the second. That's what I was gonna say, two answers. The second answer is whether you see that as an issue, that's really for you to say. Well, I mean, whether you wanted to introduce something like 2.5% or such greater amount as maybe part of the collective bargaining agreement, that's something you could put on the table.
It's hard to argue any percentage when there's not an officer there. You still pay, so.
Yeah.
I think there's,
and is this the correct name of the union, the Teamsters, Chauffeurs and Helpers?
Yeah,
I just always heard it referred to as the Teamsters, so.
yeah, no, it is. It absolutely is, and it's odd.
Yeah, okay. All right, any other comments or questions on this? I did wonder under item F, the annual review, is that something that happens that the chief and the superintendent review the SRO?
I would have to ask the chief that. It's not something I'm part of, so.
Yeah.
I think,
I mean, you're supposed to receive notice of the time.
no, I have not, never received notice of that.
All right,
So, you still need to take a vote, but I think as one follow-up, we'll pencil this in for the July 24th meeting. I'll let Dwyer and Justin know, and we can have a bigger picture discussion about the relationship.
it's 23 June 30th, 26.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's,
The motion, we approve the memorandum of understanding with the Pawtucket School District for the SRO through June 30th of 2026.
second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks.
Okay, item H is to review and vote to refer the housing production planning board. So we've seen this several times, really the substantive change that I wanted to propose is adding, Great Hill to the list of potentially, developable parcels. And that would allow us to maybe have that be an MBTA zoning location. That was deemed advisable by the way. So right now, Mullen and Naps are the two parcels that are listed. It looks like they already removed, Saints.
Yes,
Yeah, I wasn't.
yeah.
And so if we do make this change, we also need to update that map.
This you said. Mullen and Naps.
Are already on there. If you can scroll down just the prior page, names. That's the table there. Yeah, so that's how it's listed now.
He's still looking at Naps.
Well, it's already been approved, so I think it's reasonable to keep it in there.
Well, it's not specific to the MBTA zoning. It's in fact nothing to do with I mean, there's a relationship there because inclusion of a site here makes it eligible under the MBTA, but these are two completely different programs with two completely different statutory frameworks, so.
So all we're doing here
Sounds
is
like this
identify.
connectivity that's pretty serious stuff.
Well, on MBTA can latch onto this, but the inclusion on here is basically the town identifying that property as being suitable for the development of affordable or mixed income housing. And the state, as you'll recall, a big reason why this is back before you is the state rejected the version that was submitted several months ago because they said it needs to identify sites and
So once a property goes onto the housing production plan, what other restrictions, consequences, impediments does it put on that property? Can it not be used for anything else or?
none whatsoever.
So you can take every town property and throw it in there. Worry
Yeah.
about it.
Yep. Yeah, and that would be a little disingenuous, you know, because it is, I mean, people ought to be able to read it and take it as a statement of the town's position. So if you feel these sites are suitable for housing, you should put them on. If you feel they're not, you should not put them on.
Well, I'm just
But
going.
it doesn't mean anything legally,
Unintended consequence of what I always worry about.
Yeah.
Now, if you put that on, is there then something you can't do with the land, or is it under a certain agreement with someone, so such a duration, you can't do anything, or? Is it the hunting group looking at it also?
looking at the break hill site.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, so I mean. The intent is not to develop the entire parcel, or you could contemplate development, right? It's very big. But this just preserves the option if the working group does think that that's an appropriate public parcel to have. To send to HLC and do it. If it's not,
First, the housing production plan, or the decision by the.
well, so the timing is. Close, because this has to be approved by HLC before it's ineligible, before it can be, satisfy the requirements for MTA. But my impression is as long as we put this in the plan and submit it, and it's in the works, they just couldn't formally give us compliance. That was the location until this was final. Angus, do you know, I mean, I guess you can take a parcel off here in the next go around, right?
You could do it at any time.
Yeah.
You could amend the plan and resubmit it to the state. Of course, once they've approved it, they'd have to approve the amendment.
Right.
But I guess one thing, Chris, on your question that is part of why me as a former planner gets a little cynical about these plans is for exactly the reason I said, it doesn't matter. That's one of the things about, it doesn't not matter, but from like a legal standpoint, it doesn't affect zoning, it doesn't affect, it doesn't in any way change what's allowed or not allowed. And, in fact, I could point you to the 2018 housing production plan, which identifies, the certain properties for open space, like the Coffin Street property, or I'm sorry, for housing. And the 2018 open space preservation plan identifies the very same property for open space. So we had two plans adopted in the same year by the same town, identifying the same property, one for housing, one for open space. That's how much it doesn't matter, from a cynical point of view. Because of this MBTA thing, there is, the MBTA would recognize something that's identified in here, but I would say, if you think Great Hill Terrace makes sense for development of housing, put it in here. If you don't, I don't know that you would want to do that. If you don't do that, it would preempt that as a potential MBTA site.
Well, whether it makes sense for housing. Or whether it complies with MBTA are two different issues. The objective is to comply with MBTA.
Right, but this preserves our options.
Right, so that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I don't have to assess whether I think it's good for housing or not. Will help us with.
I mean, it was a prior location that housing was contemplated.
By private development, right? Down.
This gets into some of the discussions that we've had at the working group, but, and we'll talk again on Monday at that meeting, but, I will continue to recommend to the working group, only bring forward Great Hill Terrace for MBTA if you in fact have the intent to go forward with a disposition process, because even if it will check the box for this calendar year, then the minute we get into the next 2026, the state's been clear, they will look to towns that are zoning MBTA on public land to then take tangible steps for disposition of that property. You can't just zone it MBTA as public land and have 5 years pass and think the state is not gonna notice that.
Ian didn't seem to agree with you on that.
I assure you. He said in writing, they will be watching in 2026 what you're doing in terms of disposition. He absolutely said that.
So the process of doing this to zone it but not build it is not a good concept on Break Hill.
I personally do not think it makes sense to zone public land for MBTA unless there is an intent to move forward with some kind of disposition. And I feel, and Ian did say that.
I get that from, I mean, I thought he was clear on what the intent was.
He has said that they would recognize it and that they would probably allow the zoning. But, and it's a little ambiguous because the regs don't specify that. But there's an email he sent, it was in the last couple of months where he said they will be watching, if you zone public land, they will be watching what you do in 2026.
So you're gonna have to put out an RFQ or whatever it is to have somebody wanna entertain building on, acquiring and then building on the town property.
That's my opinion. I mean, I think if this is gonna rise or fall on that, I think we should put all the information in front of you so we can make sure that we're, you're acting with full information, but that is very much my understanding of it. Is that they will, you might be able to check the box this calendar year, but don't pretend that that's gonna make this issue go away.
And how would the discussion about making, designating a smaller parcel of Brick Hill for housing, how would that weigh in? I mean, we're putting the whole parcel on the HPP, but if in fact we carve out 6 acres to satisfy MBTA. I mean, that would be a part of the process, actively working on.
Which 6 acres, yeah.
One right in the middle, we can't get to. Yeah, I mean, the best 6 acres would be the multi-access, right? Right.
Yeah.
All right, so what do you want to do here?
I'm not that enthusiastic about it, to be honest. I don't see a lot of downside and very little
Well, so
upside.
there's no harm in putting it on the HPP though. While the working group resolves this question about,
It does preserve the option, it would preserve the option.
And there's gonna be an obligation.
not on the housing production plan, there will be.
Right, not on the housing production plan, that's 100% correct, yeah. There's no,
But if the MBTA group then puts that forward, then the town's gonna have to.
Well, we're not gonna put it forward if there's this, the whole reason to do that was to satisfy the input that we received that.
But if we don't vote for this on the HPP,
We can't.
there is no opportunity to put it forward. Right. Which is, I just don't see that as a good option. It opens the doors, by voting this tonight, it opens the door for the potential to put part or all that parcel to be MBTA zoning. Right, you have to consider that if you're gonna do it, as I just said.
Yeah, that's one of 5 parcels that I'm looking at. So I wanna talk to Ian more closely about it, because I didn't understand, what I was saying.
You wanna hold off on it, because I would not hold favor before.
Well, so my concern is this, if we vote on it, then it has to go back to the planning board and say already voted to approve it in this form. So if we work everything out, we do wanna have this be our zoning location where. Do we meet again before the 15th? We do, right?
yes. Before July 15th?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before the planning board would have to meet to.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah,
why don't
yeah.
we do that? We wait, and Ian is coming to our meeting on Monday, so we can
Yeah.
discuss this further.
good, yeah.
Does that sound good? Chris?
Yeah, like I said, I'm not in favor of it the way it is. Even to become engaged on it, I would have to know which piece of that parcel. It's a pretty unique parcel of land. It's to be fully considered rather than just let's cover ourselves and hope it applies. Not saying housing wouldn't be good,
Yeah, this was just to preserve our options, this is not to develop, so we'll get more information.
but if you went forward with it on the BTA, at some point, the state's gonna come back to you and say, stop moving.
I don't know, that's what we have to.
Well, that's what it sounds like.
But there's, not everyone's clear on
Okay.
so let's make sure
I'm
that we're
holding off, yeah.
clear on that.
All right, next item is the minutes. This is May 29th. Let's see, Town manager updates, item C. The private property owners around the culverts, do they give their approval, or is this just the easements that were signed?
I believe they had looked at the easements maybe. As presented.
Yeah, they, no, they haven't given their approval. There was a process ongoing and there continues to be, and everyone's kind of agreed in principle. That's been agreed all along. But even up through today, they're not actually signed because it takes, there's a lot of,
Okay, so can we just,
I think, given their approval or given their support to move forward with formalizing the easement, something like that, but yeah, it's just like everything, until it's signed, it's not signed. And they will be signed, but there's, town council reviews, their attorneys reviews,
right,
making sure the easements reference the correct plan of record, which can't be done until the Concom closes the hearing. It's just this, it's
process.
it's a process.
On the update, item F, this is on the Pentucket mixed pizza. It says once finalized will remain in place. I wasn't clear what that meant. The note, it's talking about the node concept plan.
Oh, I would say, maybe reframe that, say once. Yeah, I wouldn't even say finalized, just not get feedback from DOT. And something like, basically, once the concept planning phase is complete, which is basically on Monday at the end of the fiscal year. The concept won't be further advanced until there's funding to take it to a higher level of design. Is basically, I think, what I said.
You got that, Max? Okay. Under action items on B, this is on the working group. So the third line down, it's not a resident member, it's a board commissioner committee member. So just instead of resident, like DCC, and,
Could you repeat that word?
the sentence that begins represented on the working group should say as well as a BCC member. The requirement was somebody that was on a board committee, not a resident. And he's on the board of assessors, not the zoning board. So,
Oh, Ford,
And then he's on the Board of Assessors.
and on the top of the next page, it says resident member again, I'll just change that to BCC. Under item C, this is in the motion, it says the third abutter. I think that should be the second abutter. The third line down in bold.
Yeah.
Okay, and under item D, there's a strike through that's still there. On this discussion, it was mentioned that PEG funds could possibly cover the salary. I mean, it would be a requirement for them to cover the salary, right? That's how we pay Adams.
Yeah, this is kind of tabled for the foreseeable future, but, and I think that was one of the concerns raised, is even if the intent was to pay it from the PEG funds, if the PEG funds ever dried up.
Yeah,
So I wouldn't use the word requirement, that was the intent, but it's gonna remain a contract position for the foreseeable future.
okay.
This is.
I would change a few more sentences down. I would, instead of saying promoting him to employee status, I would just say changing him to employee status. And then the end of that sentence, there's a get that should be deleted. On page 3, item C, the agricultural committee appointed. I would, Chris, if this is all right with you, I'd say that why I felt it was advantageous. I don't think it was the board that decided. And then it's not Bill Bradley. I know that I said Bill Bradley, but that's not.
Who was it?
So, this was,
Yeah, was it first?
Jim.
Jim.
Max did say that to me, he was a basketball player, he was in Canada. And Max had to Google it was, and then they get correct.
Do you see it when it's listing the people? Do you see it?
Mhm.
Oh,
And
right.
presidential candidate for a short amount of time.
Yeah,
Primary candidate.
So it was Jim Bradley before, and then we changed it to Bill and back to Jim.
No,
no, gotta be
it,
Jim.
it was Bill. And it should be Jim. That's what I said in the meeting, that's why you worded that. I was at.
Okay, well, I know, I'm just curious, because I remember making the change on this, so now like, why is it back? So now I'm getting nervous.
All right. On the MVP grant application, halfway down, it says the board also expressed reservations over stipulations regarding wild grasses. I think that was one thing we talked about, but I don't know if we wanna just have that be the name. Or could we just delete that sentence?
And I think it was one member's comment, it wasn't a board position necessarily.
Yeah. Are you okay with just deleting that sentence? Yes.
Yeah.
Or do you wanna change it to be more general, because there were a number of
That was,
things.
yeah, it was a whole conversation.
Yeah.
I agree with the big comments.
On correspondence. Like it says in which some cases may be unrealistic, I'm not sure what that. means. This is the requirement to go to the salary range.
I know what it's intending to get at, but I don't know if there might be a better way to word that.
Became unrealistic.
Just took that.
Yeah, give applicants unreal, if,
Oh, okay.
I'm just gonna strike
Right,
that.
yes.
And put it here.
yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Okay. Right. Else?
One thing I was gonna add is on that same page that we were just on, where it was talking about, Sarkis. It was my recollection that he had said that if he was renting, it would be his preferred option would be to rent to seniors, but I thought that overall, from a development standpoint, he had said that diversity in the stock was who would be most advantageous to him, i.e. unrestricted. So that was my.
Yeah, he
Said a lot of
said
things.
both things.
Yeah.
So what I would take away from that is, and I think like on sales, he would want as broad a market as possible.
Right.
He said especially if the economy turned, that's what it meant.
Yeah, on rentals specifically, where I think that leads more toward more of a stacked flats type form of development, maybe that. I don't know, I don't know, but I know on the sales, he was definitely saying that on restricted units, because you have many more for yourself there.
Might not merit a correction, but I just didn't think that like the takeaway was that his goal was to rent to seniors so much as just if it was a rental situation, it would be for somebody probably, but.
So is there a way we could revise this to reflect that?
So I just responded that if or in a rental situation, something to that effect. Going to see
Viewing when he actually said it, he has something to.
Yeah, maybe, look back and.
Maybe just to say, instead of saying he emphasized this would expand housing stock, just say this could, because he wasn't specific about anything, it's just kind of potential. Or what do you think, Ross? Leave it?
Where are you looking with?
I mean, this is just the sentence above that. Before that, it says he emphasized this would expand housing stock. We just say this could expand housing stock, just to make it more like
So let's see, it's right.
hypothetical.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got.
Right. Anything else? Or do you see a better change? Okay.
Emotional improvement minutes of May 29, 2025, as amended. Second.
Yeah.
Aye.
Fine. Okay, general discussion, item A is the agricultural committee appointment process, so. So we had talked last time about putting out a general call for applications. Angus, can you pull up the one that's on the town web? I just didn't know if we're gonna do this, if we wanted to modify this to add any more details, less information.
Wendy, can I ask you to speak up a little bit? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Sure.
This one here?
Yeah. So this is the standard form, do we wanna just use this, or did we wanna add any additional information that we're interested? You know, if we just allow people to talk about their relevant skills, it may not say what branch of farming they're in, for example, so I don't know if we wanna add any detail. to That, or do you wanna just use this?
I think it's fine if they don't. I ain't doing enough to tell us what branch and why they should be on and probably shouldn't be on.
Okay,
It's up to them to highlight themselves.
alright,
I do think that, to me anyway, I think that substantially engaged is a important qualification. You know,
Yeah, the regulation of the bylaw
yeah,
mentions that, so.
yeah, I don't think it should be a hobbyist per se, I think it should be somebody who makes their living as a skin in the game, agriculturally, you know.
so if that's the case, I feel like that should be on the form so that it's clear that's what
Yeah.
we're looking for, or that could just be in the text. I envision this going out as an email blast, maybe that's just in the intro,
Yeah.
or do you want it to be on the form, so.
I don't have a preference, I don't know if it would upset anybody to start changing the forms, but either scenario would be fine for me if it was just acknowledged, but.
Like a job application, if you haven't done your research on the job, you should, so if you're gonna wanna be on the committee, you would read the bylaw, presumably.
You could also, yeah, I mean, don't disagree with that at all, but I think also if it goes out in news announcement, you could certainly frame it and say, you know, put in a form, interested residents are encouraged to submit supplemental information as to how, you know, how your particular interest or experience aligns with the objectives of the bylaw, or drop people to that. So just because this is the form doesn't mean they can't that's now, as you've seen, lots of committee applicants, they'll submit their resume or they'll submit a letter with this, or, you know, so I think if you tease that out from people. Some people will do it, some people won't, and that'll help you understand. Who you want to appoint.
Okay, so do you think 2 weeks is enough? If we put this out tomorrow, maybe, or Monday?
Rebecca's out tomorrow and I am in meetings from
Yeah.
morning till night tomorrow, so.
Alright, so Monday, so do you think 2 weeks for our next meeting, is that enough time to get applicants?
Yes.
Okay, so, alright. So then that will be on our agenda to review the applicants.
Of course, if you want to draft something, send it Max, he can post something.
That's
tomorrow.
nice.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to make clear that my office is
Yeah.
completely out of pocket tomorrow.
That works for you, Max. Thanks, Max.
Anything for you.
All right, do you want to see my intro before I give it to Max? Okay, I mean, I can ask Max to send it to you, I wanna see it before it gets posted.
Yeah, I don't want to slow it down. Process that first.
Alright, anything else on that? Nothing?
I had a few comments, if I may. First off, I wanted to point out that in the making of the bylaw, it does offer both commercial and non-commercial farms advocacy, mediation, which is outlined in clause 6. And also under clause 1, paragraph 2, we talk about the fact that West Newbury encourages the pursuit of all types of agriculture, including agricultural uses and related activities, and that we as a town are going to support them in functioning with minimal conflict. So while I know that the bylaw defines the word farm as a commercial entity, the bylaw that this town voted on goes beyond that in its scope. It supports all types of farms in the town. And I would encourage you guys to remember that. That's what the town voted for. Under clause 5, relative to you folks putting together an agricultural committee, I don't outright disagree, but disagree I disagree that people have to have skin in the game. Because skin in the game can mean a bunch of different things to different people. Someone could have skin in the game if they've got sheep or alpacas. They're out there every day, 24/7, year round, taking care of their livestock. They've got skin in the game. So I want you to keep in mind that this town voted for something quite broad. And that clause 5 goes on to say that the agricultural committee should be comprised of highly knowledgeable or engaged in a variety of farm types. Nowhere in that paragraph does it say that they have to be a commercial farm. So I would encourage you strongly to think about what this town voted for. And when you're making up this committee, I would really, really encourage you to consider the variety of farm types that you have in this town and how important this bylaw was, not only to our commercial farmers, but to our smaller scale farmers who were very much behind this and very involved in its drafting of it. So I've sat through 3 meetings now where you guys have talked about the agricultural committee, and what I keep hearing over and over again is commercial, commercial, commercial. And I would love for you to go back and actually read the bylaw and see where it says that this goes beyond commercial farms. That's all I want to say.
Alright. Were you saying you couldn't hear me in this room, or is somebody online saying they couldn't hear me?
No, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, okay, because we've had issues with the microphone.
Yeah.
I'll make sure. Okay.
I'm fairly deaf in my left ear,
Okay.
so I struggle a little bit.
All right, thank you. Item B is the open space and recreation plan. So I just wanted to put this on here. We were given kind of an extension, a 3-year extension on redoing the plan. If we get the action plan in, by September. So the open space committee and park and rec are working on revising the action plan. I feel like at some point it should come before this board because they're committing the town to do certain things, submitting it to the state. So this is more just to give you a heads up that that's going on. Do you wanna add anything to that?
So when you said we were given an extension, I think you're referring to the state regs allow for a community to petition
Yes.
for an extension
Yeah.
from 7 to 10
Yeah, it
years.
wasn't just West Newbury.
Right, right, so, yeah, the town would need to submit that request by, the end of September.
Yeah.
But in order for the state to consider extending the, uh, uh, approval from the 7 years, for another 3, you've got to submit an updated action plan.
Mhm.
So I could not agree more, but Wendy said that this board, as the entity that submitted this, got to vote that OSRP, while Open Space Committee and Park and Rec Commission ought to be the prime movers, I'm kind of working on that. It's this board that votes it, submits it, and it's really important to have a plan submitted to the state that reflects, your actual policy intent and policy, priorities and objectives, because kind of getting back to, 20 or 30 minutes ago, kind of the cynicism of public plans, it's, you don't want to have something that this board submits and, with no intent to follow through on. So.
Yeah, there are some very broad and specific, action plan items that I'm not sure we would all agree with, so. And so I recall in the past, it also went to the planning board.
It
and
did, yeah,
So I think probably we need to allow time for it to circulate to all those boards and. Because it also states which entity is responsible, and if select board is responsible for something, I feel like we ought to weigh in on it, same with the planning board and conservation commission, so.
yeah, I mean, I remember one instance, or pretty early in my time here, where there was a, warrant article actually submitted, this before any of you were on the board, but with a warrant article was brought forward by a member of the Open Space Committee. It never made the warrant, but with the intent to put a conservation restriction on the Break Hill Terrace property, and I brought that to the then board, as part of one of the many lists of potential articles, and the select board at the time, they said, that's not our policy intent. And the member of the Open Space Committee was, well, it says right here in the OSRP that you want to do that, and it's just, it creates an issue if and what that told me is that, like, the board, when they voted it, and this was before any of you were involved, they voted that, but maybe they hadn't read it thoroughly or hadn't sweated the details, so I want to make sure this board sweats the details, and you have to the end of September to submit that, so, yeah. it
It's
should
probably
get
a 5-page document, just the table with action items, so it shouldn't be too much.
good, yeah. Yeah, that was the whole OSRP, which was much more lengthy.
Okay, our next item is an update on the Whittier Tech MSBA process and timeline.
Chris, I've been talking a lot. You wanna take a crack at this one? I'll say one thing. It's a big deal.
I know.
There's a lot to do, and this is gonna be a major work item for all 11 cities and towns for the next couple of years. So we need to definitely buckle our seatbelts. That's kind of my only thing to say.
It's good news, bad news scenario.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's a path forward, the agreement. All the 11 communities signed the letter the other day. So we can get to the MSBA to see if we can get in their pipeline. Then we had a meeting after, and they started talking about getting a building committee established, and the commitment for that is like, yeah, no thanks.
It's a lot. Yeah.
You're the school guy,
No, I think they want specific individuals, like with specific instruction. They're trying to slot people in.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know how we're gonna decide that and get there, right?
From the select boards or just from residents in
From the
general?
community, yeah.
Okay.
And then what's the connectivity to the select,
Yeah.
it's a very. I'm not even sure how they're gonna establish the building committee. They're aware of. They have to populate it significantly different than last time. They realized that was one of the flaws, I think.
So it's not gonna be that each town will have a select board member and
No, they want somebody who can support the.
the.
I guess MSBA has certain criteria for
Yeah,
what they have to be, and they want each community, I don't know if they're gonna define. What those are, they want each community to look at, or I don't know.
My understanding is that each community has a designee. And I think you, as the chief executive, and actually, I guess you're the chief elected body, I think you would want to sign a letter saying you support the appointment of X person. as West Newbury's rep to the school committee, right, or school building.
Right, they can get 11 people all slotted for the same position and not comply with the MSBA's requirements, correct?
Yeah, I remember looking at that as part of the Whittier presentation, and it's very specific,
Yeah.
you know, like accounting,
Structure,
Engineering, yeah.
certain people within the administration have to be there.
yeah, so.
So,
it
yeah, we
might
can
not
make
be-
a call for a resident, but
yeah,
then what? If it doesn't fit Whittier's needs.
Yeah,
I hadn't actually thought about that. That's a logistical issue on the
Yeah.
timeline there.
Yeah, unless you're the first one in the door, say, here's that person. Then they gotta, you know, so do we put out a call to community members?
right, so that's September 30th.
Yeah.
And I think we should have the website, we just have a construction / engineering / school building experience to be the town's rep to the Whittier Building Committee.
I think once the school building committee is set up, assuming that that member is not one of us here, which I think is safe to assume it's not gonna be one of us here. Just because of bandwidth issues, if for no other reason, and there's probably other reasons too. I would think that we would want to establish, an expectation with that person that they're regularly briefing the board. And that there's an absolutely regular flow of information. Because like with the Kentucky School Building Committee, it was, you know, myself and a member of the board, so that communication happened because we were all here anyway, but I think that's something that, you know, we want to make sure that's, there's just a very, so I talked to Phil Collegiero earlier this week about this a little bit, and he was, you know, he was kind of asking, oh, do you guys know who you're gonna, I said, no, this is on the, wow, you know, and I said, no, but I said, I thought it was very likely that the board would be, looking to someone with a deep ties in the community, deep history of service to the community with a lot of, kind of standing and stature, someone who's been in the public eye, I would think, I mean, I don't know who you're gonna look for, but I would think you'd want, because it's such a high profile issue. And you're gonna want something that's like broadly perceived as like very credible, and not that there's not tons of credible people who are newer to public service or haven't been on a committee, but given both the importance of this, the accelerated timeline, I think you're gonna want someone who's a high profile figure in the community, and that's gonna
Somebody
be.
of mine,
Yeah,
no, I do.
oh, good, I'm glad you do. But,
But do they have to have a specific, like,
Sir, you have to fulfill the MSBA,
yeah, so who's gonna decide that though? Is
well, that's what I'm
Whittier-
saying, if all
yeah,
committees throw it in,
And they're all construction engineers, that's
Right.
Yeah,
unless you can, in essence, say, well, I can also do this, or have, you know.
yeah,
you know.
yeah, it seems like we need to know that first. And what we're asking for.
Right. I think you get
When
down,
is the next meeting?
it's the 9th, they just sent out the agenda earlier today, I think it's the 9th. Yeah, it's the 9th at 10 o'clock. And, the agenda was just sent out today. And it's got, MSBA schedule / next steps, membership. So,
All right, so you get more information on.
yeah, I think that definitely warrants a conversation with someone before that July 9th meeting, just to understand how do they intend to reconcile that?
and if they had a joint worksheet, and once was populated, you knew that your town couldn't have that slot, that would be helpful.
Mhm.
Gotta be something like that.
Yeah,
Be pretty difficult to assign each town, this is a position you can have, because you might not have that skill set within that town.
right. Do you happen to remember some of the other, I know they talk about municipal finance and like town manager types, and there may well be town administrator, town manager types that are fully available and interested, you know.
I don't remember the
Obviously, that's
criteria,
not
they ran
something
through
our
them
town
quickly,
can do, yeah,
obviously the business manager from Whittier,
yeah.
Laurie, and things like that. But I don't remember.
Are they, what's the total number of members on the school
It's
building committee?
14.
Okay,
But what there was last.
Yeah, it is, because you get 3 towns have 2 each. So,
Oh, I meant the building committee.
Oh, building committee?
I thought.
That was my question.
Well, I thought they were saying 11, because these committees, well, it's gonna be much
But
bigger.
like Maureen, it would have to be bigger, if Maureen and Tara are part of that.
It was gonna be closer to 20 as they were naming the positions. I started counting, so that's gonna be a large committee.
Yeah,
All right,
School committee is not. So.
and then this discussion of enrollment and whether this ended up being a pretty big discussion at the last meeting, is that the prior project was designed for, you know, the same enrollment they're designed for now. Now that we're back into the process from square one, that isn't necessarily the outcome. There was a lot of interesting discussion there. And I think that's gonna be a major focus of the next.
larger or smaller?
If anything, larger. But,
Looking for large. And
yeah,
curious, I saw a story the other day that talked about AI and all the positions it's gonna eliminate. You know, a lot of professions in accounting and things like that, so the one positions that obviously won't will be trades. It's it's pretty important, so I understand the need for it a lot. And I think with this plan and the joint campus, you have that opportunity too, so. I would fully expect to see that number go up, we hope it probably will.
All right, next item is just a review of the format and objectives for our goal setting meeting tomorrow.
actually, I don't wanna belabor this, but there was one other kind of big discussion item at the last meeting, which I think is gonna get a lot more attention at the next meeting. And I don't know about you, Chris, but I felt completely in over my head on this, because it's not something I've given really much thought to at all. But that was kind of enrollment by city and town within district, enrollment
I
trends.
don't like that conversation we started.
You know, and really people around this working group wanting to really understand how are those decisions made of how many are applying, how many are accepted, what are the criteria? You know, is it gonna go toward a place of different communities have a certain number of entitled spots? But that's a very big discussion,
Well, it's
very
huge.
important discussion, not something I feel I have any background, or I don't bring anything to the table on that. You may, because you've been involved with a lot longer than I have here in West Newbury, as well as a former school committee member, but. Like at the meeting, I'll be curious, because some of the towns have clearly had a lot of thought about how they wanted that to go, or questions that they.
Yeah, they wanna grab more slots, but then some towns don't have the finances to support those slots too, so that's gonna be real curious. I think there's gonna be some wrangling and wrestling.
It seemed like, yeah. So,
I sat there and I'm thinking in my head, well, it doesn't affect West Newbury a whole lot, we actually went down in enrollment.
right,
And we have such a minimal number of slots, I mean, you gotta guarantee everybody a certain number minimum, I think. That's a whole nother, that's probably gonna be part of the rewrite of the regional agreement that gets to that point, I would assume.
you would assume, yeah. Yeah, so that's the third item on the agenda for the July 9th meeting, is enrollment data by town and city. But it's a bigger discussion than that, they'll provide data, but it's funny, I wonder how much the NECC administrators really, like, I feel like they're kind of. Like,
What are we doing?
What are we into? Thank you.
All right. So, any thoughts about tomorrow, or? I like the way this is broken out, I think it kind of narrows down what we're
Good, yeah,
focusing on.
there's a lot there, I don't expect you've read
There's
through
a
it all.
ton, well, no, I just picked up the packet, I'm looking for it now, the packet earlier from Jenny, printed out with, thinking, what's the anticipation of what we're gonna do with this?
I think I definitely want us to start by just kind of restating everything that we're currently doing and what I'd like to do. I'd love to have found time to do a brief memo, but that didn't happen. It's not gonna happen for tomorrow, but I think for everything that I have represented as being active or ongoing, I think it would be good to kind of go down that list as just an elevator pitch of like, where are we? Because there are some of those things on there that are before the board regularly. There are some things on there that aren't before the board very often, or don't even need to be. But I think it's important, I want to make sure you guys really have a good finger on the pulse of what's actively underway. And so there are things that might be, like in your mind might be like, oh, complete, we voted that weeks ago, but like, you know. But in my life, I'm still working on that every single day of the week, like I need you to know, like. Where we are with those things, and maybe we don't go through every one, because we could spend a lot of time, but maybe go down and just say. If there's anything on the list where if I'm representing it's active or ongoing, like. If, you know, one of you said, well, where do we stand with that, and not go through it for 10 minutes, but just like. Kind of where do we stand on that, just so we can take stock of. Knowing where we are, because it's so important to see things through and finish them. And really ideally before we take on anything new. And there may be things that we, like I alluded to in the memo, there may be things that are active or that the time is going toward that you as a board may look at, say, you know, we really don't want. You, Angus, or your staff to be putting a lot of time toward that. That's helpful too, because at least that gives me some backing because these things all came from somewhere.
Yeah.
And some of what we do is reactive or tries to be responsive to resident concerns or things we hear from committees and. You know, if we're working on things and putting resources toward things that you as a board say, look, you shouldn't be doing a minute toward that. That's very hard for me to say without the board giving me that, because the first thing someone's gonna do if I say no to anyone in this community, they'll just go over my head. So if the board's not like, if I'm not aligned with the board, that then becomes a problem. So I try to kind of keep everyone happy, because when they're not happy, it blows up and becomes a time issue. So the effect of that is we're doing many, many, many more things than we have time to do. And that's why we're constantly rushing, and we're constantly working long hours, and we're constantly getting packets to you guys, you know, 46 hours ahead of, or 45 hours ahead of a meeting, which isn't ideal, so.
Yeah. So I mean, so there's 2 pages here of the items that you're just talking
Yeah.
about. So if we could focus on those 2 pages, it's 91 and 92 in the packet.
Yeah,
And especially for you, Ross, if there's anything you have no idea what it's about, I mean, flag that, so we definitely make sure, yeah.
well, but this is kind of, it's actually the page 93, 94.
I
These are
thought
the,
those were,
oh, these
those
are the
are required.
required, oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
you're
think
right.
it's still important to talk about those, but if we're gonna prioritize the non-required ones, we focus on those 2.
Got it, yes, no, that's correct. Yes, well, it's actually the color coding that really is, so if something's shaded in yellow, that's my way of saying that's something that's an active thing. And so you might look at that and say, why is that active? That's not something we should be focused on right now. That's good feedback.
So last year, we assigned everything a time frame, immediate, near term, and long term. I don't know if that was helpful, because we ended up so fluid, you know. I don't know if we wanna try to do that again.
I like that in concept. In reality, it's,
really
you
works.
really can't. Yeah,
I mean, it was helpful to say to a committee, for example, I'm sorry, that's long term, you know, we're not gonna work on it right now, but. But if we go through each one and give you that kind of feedback, that's what you need, right?
yeah, and I think if nothing else, it'll just continue to kind of bring the board fully into the whole universe of things, which. You know, honestly, Wendy as chair and others who've been chair in the past, the chair always has more visibility than the rest of the board, because that's their job as chair and that's how they set the agenda. And, but I think, you know, this would be great to give the full board the opportunity to fully, and then if there's stuff that you do want us to work on that's not on our radar, or that's, that you think needs to be treated with more urgency, that's helpful. To have that direction as a board, not as 3 individuals, but as a board, what's important.
Okay, I also had sent out the questionnaire to all the committees to try to get a sense of what their priorities are. I have some back. Do you want me to share those? Is that helpful to you before we have this discussion, or do you want me to just summarize what their priorities are for the coming year? Or do we not?
A lot of that. I mean, is it extensive?
Well, the questionnaire says, you know, what are your immediate priorities, 2-year, 5-year? I would just be looking at the immediate priorities.
But to go into this without understanding what we're looking for is kind of not getting one. That could, throws a whole wrench into this too.
On the other hand, again, I think to me, it's like, if you're appointing the committee, if there's things on here that we're having a hard time advancing because of bandwidth, if you can task a committee, so a great example is, I thought the discussion a couple of weeks ago with energy and sustainability, I thought was really good. As long as they're doing what you are directing them to do, the committees can help us advance things rather than the other way around with driving your work plan. Ideally, more of the committees can be working committees that are actually advancing initiatives. And that can help with the pinch point issues with, town staff.
As we go through these tomorrow night, is it possible for you to sort of blend that in?
Yeah.
Okay, if that's, yeah, that'd be the best way if it can work.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Okay, anything else on this, Angus?
What's that, 4 o'clock?
4 to 6.
And I did think of one more that I didn't put on here, but that every single time I drive by, Prospect Street, I remember to mention and we haven't even talked about it, but I mentioned it, we talked about it a month ago, but I think we ought to have a policy in place that when a water project tears up a road, there should be a full depth, or not full depth, a full overlay rather than a patch. To not leave the road in a deteriorated condition.
So,
It would add cost to the project, and the ship has sailed for this one, I'm talking about the next one.
No, but they're gonna put another coat over it, no, they ground and patched it, and they're gonna go over this, correct?
But it's not a full overlay,
It's not going to.
it's not a side, no, that was not part of the scope.
I thought Butch was gonna do that on Church Street.
He's gonna do it on Church Street because
Okay.
that's part of his paving program
Got it.
for next year.
Well, I didn't
He's
think it was
gonna
part
do
of the
it.
water contractors, I thought the town was gonna come back and do.
It's gonna do Church Street next year as part of the regular paving, that's always been part of that prospect. Butch thinks he can get another couple of years, but it's gonna be, they did the trench and they did the.
Oh, I thought they were going with a full grind and over top.
I mean,
Wow.
if you guys feel that that's important, he will take those cues from you and he'll do it, but that'll be on the taxpayer's dime, not on
Right,
the.
yeah, so.
No, I didn't, I thought.
It was
that's what
basically
they
a
do.
cost shifting.
Yeah.
Whereas one might look at, like, the right way to do the water project in the first place would have been to include in the scope full overlay. Edge to edge repaving.
That would have been a huge.
So there's kind of that, I would say you could argue that cost was artificially somewhat lower than perhaps the true cost. And so now is it really on the taxpayer to finish the project? If there was a standard, and I think we would apply that standard to a private utility that was coming tearing up a town. I know other towns I've worked in, they would take the position, if you're tearing up, our road, you're gonna do a full overlay. We don't have any policy on that. If back when that project was awarded, I think that would have been a nice thing to have the water department's consulting engineer looking out for that has happened. But so that's something every single time I drive by, I'm like, that's a cost shift onto the taxpayer.
Prospect is done as of now, in essence.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
pulled all their equipment out.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay, that,
I mean, it's better than it was, but it's
Yeah.
still rough,
not very good.
Have you guys ever driven Cabot Street in Beverly? Oh, yeah, it's time.
So anyway, that's something that,
Yeah.
I forgot to add it to this, but again, it would be a policy. It would take time, it would take, it should be on the list, and ideally, we would have. All day to sit and do these projects, that's not the reality, we're working hard every day around the town and. All the things that go into that, so we have to be selective in what we take on policy wise, but. But that's one that should be on here, it's basically a policy for, restoration of road, after a utility project.
All right, anything else on that? So item E here, there was an addendum the current select board policies.
Yeah, so after the discussion, Ross and I had talked the day after the last meeting and just chatting and I said, oh, you know, it may interest you, there's this policy on the purchasing electric, you know, equipment. And I sent it to him and as we were talking, I said, you know what, geez, we should just on a routine basis be putting these policies on the table on a regular basis. And, you know, I don't want to spend all year, every year writing policy. That's not really a great use of time. But I think, you know, when there's an election, changing composition, it's a great time to just recirculate, say, hey, these are the board's policies. So I'd say over the next few weeks, next month or two, if you want to just, if you see things in there that you think we ought to put under the microscope or don't make sense, I just wanted to get them in circulation. They're posted on the website. You may have all seen them before, but it just kind of came up organically in the
Yeah.
discussion of that one item. And I said, you know, that's probably not a bad thing. It's just periodically. revisit
So
those.
should we set a date then? Maybe if we set a date of a meeting to discuss it, then we can each go through and see if there are any that we wanna flag to possibly amend.
Is there a noise ordinance in your policies, was that a, cause I've had people ask me this on a few occasions.
That's something, I mean, I'm happy to talk about that now, but you and I could talk at length about
Yeah.
that. I have a lot of knowledge on that. There's been discussion about it since but it's not what people think it is. It's virtually impossible for communities to regulate noise under state law. It's gotta be 10 decibels above ambient. You can't know what ambient is without doing a sound study over a certain period of time with a certain meter. And you have to establish that it's 10 decibels above for a sustained period of time. It's come up in every single town I've worked in. If something is truly a nuisance there, you can try to be a good neighbor and do it that way, but it's notoriously difficult for towns to truly regulate noise. Some
That's
towns,
Specific, like you could regulate leaf blowers.
that's exactly what I was about to say. Towns have and can establish bylaws for things like leaf blowers. So there are certain things you can do.
I've also seen towns establish like a ceiling on decibels. Like 65 or 70 during.
I'd be interested to see that. My understanding that would be totally just not allowed under
Really?
state law. That's,
We have really loud equipment and sometimes we have to, you know, look at what the warnings are, so.
I mean, they might, as a condition of approving a project,
Right,
that's a different thing because that triggers authority under a permit granting authority. That's different from like a townwide bylaw or ordinance. The state, it all falls under state DEP and basically it's, in order to be action, what's gotta be 10 decibels above, so.
Another one's pickleball, right? You know, a lot of people struggle with that, so.
Yep.
And they regulate that specific to pickleball.
So our July meetings are the 10th and the 24th, is that right?
Yep.
So how about the first meeting in August that we plan to just identify if there are any policies we want to.
Good, we'll put that on for the first August, agenda.
So just seven.
14, no, for 7.
Seven for a moment.
Good.
All right. One thing that I did want to touch on tomorrow as well is, if we're gonna make any changes in committees. There's a few committees we've talked about, revising the bylaws or so forth, so I think that's perfect to discuss tomorrow also, because that is a workload issue. The revised bylaws. So if there are any that you are thinking of, share tomorrow. All right, items for next meeting. I am working on framework for trail maintenance on town-owned properties with conservation commission, so just giving you a heads up on that. Right now, it's kind of ad hoc. Who does it, who's responsible for it, so something I think as the custodial entity of most of the town properties, the select board has a role, as does the conservation commission, they also have custody of some properties. Just to review, any other items you want to have on future agendas?
One thing, we did get, advice back from town council on the hunting working group process.
Oh, that's right.
And we didn't put it on for tonight, because. I mean, I can email it around, but, it's gotta be kind of reconciled with info we've got from insurance. It's gonna take some time to process. It's a it was an extensive list of questions that was sent to them. It was an extensive list of responses, so we need to kind of digest that, but I could send that around just so you have it. Personally, I don't think that's gonna be ready for like, because I know, you know, we're looking to not have things on multiple agendas. I think at a staff level, it's gonna take some time working with insurance and processing that, and there's just,
Probably wait for new agents and.
yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna be, you know, a little while, but I think maybe August would be that same meeting. Not, but I can send it around so you know what I'm talking about, but, there's a lot of details in there that will take time to process and understand, and, we're pretty straight right now.
All right, I'll move that we go into executive session, under MGL chapter 38, section 21A3 and 6.
Second.
Favor, read aye.
Well,
We'll return to open session for the sole purpose of adjourning. Nay.
Thank you.